Well, joining me now to discuss this is the Conservative MP for Romford, Andrew Rossendale, and the Labour MP for Ealing Central and Acton, Rupa Huq. Thank you both for being with us. I mean, Andrew Rossendale, you voted against the tier system, I think I'm right in saying, in the Commons. So I assume at a London level, you're against this.
I am against it. I think we've taken this too far, and I think we are losing the plot. We're taking it to extremes. We're not realising that the effects of locking everything down and shutting everything up and closing down businesses are going to have a huge effect on people's lives, on our economy. I don't think this is the way to achieve what we all want to achieve, is to get rid of this horrible disease, but at the same time, we must ensure that the world keeps turning. We must go about our business. We shouldn't be letting businesses go to the wall. We're going to suffer horribly in the long term if we continue to lock everything down. It's not the long-term answer.
Right, so Rupa Huq, I mean, even if we accept the tier system, in London, why should it be a blanket crackdown like this? Why not more targeted?
Well, look, London councils, Public Health England, the London bit of it, the Mayor of London, all these people think that we need a pan-London approach because we are one city and we need to act as one on this. It's not a hermetically sealed place that, you know, when you leave one bit of it, the barriers come down, you get your passport out, you get your phrase book out. People in London are people that sort of travel. So, you know, I've been in Westminster earlier today. I live in Ealing. I got on a tube. God knows who was on that tube and where they came from. So, I mean, it makes complete sense to act as one in London. This situation is fluid. So my own borough, Ealing, we've just found out, has gone to #1, quite scary, in the coronavirus capital chart. But, you know, only recently it was halfway down that table. So these things move. Every part of London is going up in rate of infections, in death toll as well, sad to say. So I think for now, we act as one. But I would agree with Andrew that this...
I just want to, sorry to interrupt, but that's the point. Your borough is the worst in London, or it's certainly among the worst, but others are not, and nowhere near your borough. I mean, has the case really been made for a London-wide crackdown?
Yes, it has, because these things are not static. So as I say, last week, we were not in that position. Not that long ago in this thing, we were halfway down. We only had 20 infections. Now we're told that we have 144 per 100,000. So these things can change. It can take one event and someone can shoot right up that table.
OK, well, Andrew Rossendale,
London approach. They said they wanted to listen to experts. Now, had enough of experts was the days of Brexit. So I think they should listen to the experts. But I would agree with the tier system is not enough. And I think, you know, we need a dramatic intervention.
OK, we'll talk about that in a second. But first, Andrew Rossendale, I mean, I suppose there is a point there that people do move around London. People live and work in different parts of London. People use hospitals in different parts of London.
Mark, I don't know if you live in so-called London, but there is no definition of London, really. There's a thing called Greater London, but if Rupert's seriously trying to tell me that what goes on in the Essex end of London in places like Havering is the same as what goes on in Lambeth and Ealing, I'm afraid it's not. No, Rupert, you said a lot. Let me now have to say that this is madness. You're using a boundary of Greater London created in the 60s to determine the health priorities of people. We aren't one city. We're different areas with different needs. And I think that, yes, it should be much more local. Certainly parts of South London is a very low COVID rate at the moment, and they're being locked down like the rest of London. I don't think it's sensible to do this. I think we should shield the people that are most at risk, but the rest of us should get back to work, get the economy moving. Let's ensure that we have a future ahead of us. Because locking everything down and boxing everybody together is really not the answer.
Right, I saw Rupa Huq wanted to come in there.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a commonly understood definition that we have 32 London boroughs. So that makes a logical unit of analysis. And also, where would Andrew then go? Because Essex, which is the next one out from him, is also in tier 2. If you look at all the boroughs around the edges, Elmbridge, which is the one after Kingston, if you keep going south, that's also in tier 2. So, I mean, it seems to be the inevitable. Cases are rising everywhere. They have doubled, they've tripled in some places. So I think it's sensible to treat London as one. This kind of I'm all right, Jack is not the way to do it. Where would...
It's not about that at all. Rupert, there are people going to be losing their jobs. There are businesses going to the wall. At the same time, we're not actually targeting the protection of the people that most need it. So, of course, every borough is different, and we need to ensure that we have the flexibility to deal with the situation rather than have a broad brush approach.
If you go for this balkanised thing, where would it end? Within my borough, I have to say, in the west that I don't represent, cases are more heavy. The chart with the colours are darker in the west than the east, where I represent. But I do recognise we are one borough. Some things, it's got to end somewhere. I could say in this street we've had no cases. Let's not be in it at all.
So Andrew Rossendale, I mean, and in answer to your question, I do live in so-called London, as you put it. And what I don't understand is how you can begin to enforce a targeted lockdown, because people do move around. How on earth would you enforce something that wasn't a blanket lockdown?
But I'm not supporting the idea of any type of lockdown. I think we've passed that stage. I think we now have to get our economy back on its feet, because I worry that the cure for this is going to finish up being worse than the actual disease that we're facing. So I think we need to look after those who are most vulnerable. We need to all be sensible and do our duty and behave in a responsible way towards others. But I think it is entirely wrong to be forcing businesses to close down and forcing people to stop going about their daily lives. I think that is not the way to solve it.
So we're into the broader argument, really, of this so-called herd immunity, where you protect the vulnerable, everybody else gets on with it. I mean, Rupa Huq, what do you make of that argument?
Look, I think in countries where they've had low numbers of cases, low incidences of it, low numbers of deaths, they've had to do something very dramatic, a radical intervention. And Keir Starmer this week proposed a circuit breaker. Now, that is not an indefinite lockdown, but what it would be is 2 weeks of very strict enforcement of don't leave the house, don't mix with others. And in places like Taiwan, in South Korea, heck, even in China, there are no cases in Wuhan where the whole thing originated, because that dramatic action. And I think this mucking about with the tiers is not going to really change anything that we've changed overnight. There's no household mixing. That's the only difference. To be honest, my local police tell me that pretty much all these rules went out the window when Dominic Cummings was doing all his comings and goings. So I think you need something radical and dramatic like we had in March, a 2-week lockdown, circuit breaker.
Circuit breaker, right, I've got that.
Because loads of parents have trouble with childcare over half term. They can't get the week off work. If we do it, then just an extra week.
Okay, so there's 30 seconds. There's 30 seconds left. Andrew Rossendale, just have the last 30 seconds.
Okay, it's not going to. What Rupert's suggesting is not the solution. It's another sticking plaster. It's going to delay the inevitable. We have to, until there's a vaccination, we have to learn to live with this. But to shut everything down and to let everything fall to pieces is going to do long-lasting damage to people's lives and the economy. We simply shouldn't be doing that. We need to pass this stage. We need to protect the vulnerable, but we need to get our economy back on its feet and people's lives back together again. Locking things down on a permanent basis, as Rupert seems to be suggesting, simply isn't going to solve this problem.
2 weeks is not a permanent basis. This would be a short, sharp shock, and it would come with
another 2 weeks and another 2 weeks, and it will go on forever.
All right, we've got to stop it there. This could go on forever as well, but we can't. So Andrew Rossendale and Rupa Huq, thanks very much.